am cabined, cribbed, confined, bound into saucy doubts and fears.
Isolation can be scary. The unaccustomed quietude produces a canvas upon which our minds may paint our doubts and fears. As we huddle in our homes, we too may feel cabined, cribbed, and confined. The trepidation we sense beyond the locked doors of our little sanctuaries seems like thawing ice on a rotting roof to seep into our lives, our homes, and our minds, inviting us to commune with our own shadows.
Stars, hide your fires. Let not light see my black and deep desires.
Famed Swiss psychoanalyst Carl Jung referred to this process as shadow work.
By communing with our shadow, or rather the parts of ourselves we keep hidden from the light, we inevitably find ourselves in conflict. Conflict within the self, within our families, and our communities. But a shadow cannot live in light. And from this conflict comes healing and ultimately forgiveness.
Some scholars believe that Shakespeare wrote some of his greatest work in isolation.
The plagues, vast forests, and dark storms that engulfed Shakespeare's hometown of Stratford-upon-Avon no doubt provided Shakespeare the opportunity to dally with solitude and wink at loneliness.
As we retreated from work and schools this past spring, sagacious Shakespeare seemed to have the words for our unprecedented times.
From you have I been absent in the spring, when proud-pied April, dressed in all his trim, hath put the spirit of youth in everything. That heavy Saturn laughed and leaped with him.
Our bodies were separated by time, distance, and danger, but we persevered and determined to remain connected to one another until, as Shakespeare said, our heartstrings broke.
Weary with toil, I haste me to my bed. The dear repose for limbs travel tired. But then begins a journey in my head to work my mind when body's works expired. For then my thoughts from far where I abide intend a zealous pilgrimage to thee.
Unfortunately, we cannot make our zealous pilgrimage to your schools and auditoriums this year. And though it pains us, we think there may be a way to connect with one another despite our isolation. So, we call this series Shakespeare in Isolation, Conflict and Forgiveness.
What follows is a series of interactive scenes, monologues, table work, interviews, and activities. It's in chronological order. However, feel free to pick and play as you please, or as you like it, because all's well that ends well, to click or not to click.
I think they got it. There'll be scenes we'll have you watch the video and reflect on, as well as other clips we'll have you pause the video and experiment with the themes on your own.
To give us a taste, let's continue our exploration of isolation, to depict conflict and allay the controversy, to embrace the aliveness of forgiveness.
You've had your coffee today, haven't you?
Going on cup number 3.
Let's look at some monologues. As you watch the scene, really try to put yourself into it. Feel the pain and longing of isolation. To start our introduction to isolation, we'll look at Richard II. As the newly ousted king, he contemplates his new life alone in a jail cell.
I have been studying how I may compare this prison where I live unto the world. And because the world is populous, and here there is no creature but myself, cannot do it. Yet, I'll hammer it out. Thoughts, people, this little world, in humors like the people of this world, and no thought is contented. Thoughts tending to ambition, they do plot unlikely wonders. how these weak, vain nails may tear a passage through my ragged prison walls. Thoughts tending to content, they do flatter themselves that they are not the first of fortune's fools. And thus play I in one person many people. Sometimes am I king, and then treasons make me wish myself a beggar. Then crushing penury persuades me I was better when a king, and then I'm kinged again. Whate'er I be, man is, with nothing pleased till he be eased with being nothing. I wasted time, and now doth time waste me.
Ooh, did you feel the despair in that scene? And notice how Richard began to pass the time with mind games.
Is that like Minecraft?
Absolutely not.
Oh.
In a moment, we'll ask you to do something similar.
Have a paper and pencil ready.
You'll have 1 minute. On your paper, write out the kind of mind games you played to pass the time and keep yourself occupied while you were in isolation. You can write a list or free write. For example, I might write a paragraph about drinking my tea while watching the leaves fall and describe how that felt.
Well, I might write about all of my favorite cheeses that I've eaten this year. Cheddar, feta, Parmesan, Munster, yak cheese.
Really, whatever works for you. So, we'll start the timer here. Ready, set, go. Easy, right? So now we'll have you scan your list or free writing and pick out 2 or 3 words that you think are particularly interesting.
Write them at the top of your page, like this.
Shakespeare used the inspiration of isolation to write unforgettable poetry. We'd like for you to try to do the same. We'll give you 5 minutes. Use the words at the top of your paper to inspire you to write your own isolation poetry.
You can try something that rhymes, a haiku, free verse, or even write a short story in prose.
There are no wrong answers.
There's nothing better than a bowl full of feta.
I'm sure you can find a way to make it creative and fun. Your 5 minutes starts now. Go ahead.
So now we're back. How did it go? Feel free to pause the video now to share your work with your teacher or your class, or hold on to it to use later.
Earlier, we discussed a peculiar shadow that descends when we are in times of isolation.
But by confronting and accepting our realities, we're able to find peace, freedom, and forgiveness.
For our next bit of text, we'll hear a plea from a penitent wizard named Prospero from Shakespeare's Tempest. He was once banished to a deserted island to live an isolated life and became obsessed with revenge. Yet now, with faith and hope restored, he accepts forgiveness and pleads for freedom from the barren island where he has suffered.
We'll hear more about Prospero later, but for now, take a listen and notice if you can hear the themes of longing, freedom, and forgiveness.
Feel free to take notes and discuss with your class about forgiveness. What is it, why is it important, and how it is granted. If you aren't with your class, write a page or 2 and share it with your class later.
And now, lend me your ears.
Now my charms are all o'erthrown, and what strength I have is mine own, which is most faint. Now 'tis true I must be here confined by you, or sent to Naples. Let me not, since I have my dukedom got, and pardon the deceiver, dwell in this bare island by your spell. but release me from my bands with the help of your good hands. Gentle breath of yours my sails must fill, or else my project fails, which was to please. Now I want spirits to enforce, art to enchant, and my ending is despair, unless I be relieved by prayer, which pierces so that it assaults mercy itself and frees all faults. As you from crimes would pardon be, let your indulgence set me free.
What you've experienced is a little taste of how we'll work together.
We know this isn't the traditional way of doing things, but we only ask you to bring your enthusiasm and willingness to explore these topics with us from your classroom or your kitchen table.
We now leave you with some instruction from The Tempest.
The hour's now come. The very minute bids thee ope thy ears. Obey and be attentive.
And thank you for exploring Shakespeare in isolation, conflict, and forgiveness.